Hello and welcome to Really Cool People. This is a podcast produced by Schweitzer Church, and I'm your host, Jason Leininger. This is a place to hear stories of really cool people that I've met across the way, whose stories are indeed fascinating. The hope is that you will be inspired, encouraged, and challenged through moments of serendipity. Where those come, we're going to find out together. In a sermon entitled The Weight of Glory, one of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, said, "There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal." It is my joy over the next few minutes to introduce you to someone who may, in fact, most often said that they seem rather ordinary, especially to themselves, and yet they are a really cool person. Today, we're going to meet and talk to Marianne Gustin. Well, we welcome Marianne Gustin. And Marianne, it's a joy to have you and invite you to introduce yourself to us by telling us your story.
Well, as Jason said, I'm Marianne Gustin, and my story started out in Houston, Texas, in the heat of World War II, 1943. And my father was finishing up college at Rice University, and he was looking to go into meteorology work. And so the Navy was offering a great training opportunity in that, and so he joined the Navy. And being wartime, we got moved around quite a bit, but he never actually had to go overseas. And once he was discharged, our first place to be stationed or sent to was Little Rock, Arkansas, and we were there for a few years. And then he eventually went back to Oklahoma City, which is really where our family's roots are. That's where my grandparents, aunts and uncles, everybody lived. And so we were there for several years. Then I also came from a large family. I have 6 brothers and sisters. As I said, we were there for about 6 years, and when the Weather Service decided to develop satellites, they picked 6 men to go to college and learn how to program the computers that they would need. So my father was one of the men, and he was picked to go to Texas A&M. I was in my freshman year of high school, and that was a pretty exciting year for me because at that time Texas A&M was an all-male college, and I was a freshman high school girl. But we were only there for a year, and it was really different for me because I'd always been in large city schools, and because we moved, we didn't have a lot of opportunity to build friendships, and that was a very small town, K through 12 school, and it was just a whole different way of going to school for me during that year, and one of my best years of school, I think. So when my father finished up his training there, he was transferred to the Washington, D.C. area, where he went to work with the other 6 men to develop the weather satellites. And so also all during this time, my mother's health was poor, and it was really beginning to fail. And I was the oldest girl of the 7 children, and I was actually quite a bit older than some of the 5 younger ones. So more and more, as her health failed, more and more just caring and looking after the children and helping her just fell to my shoulders. And she actually passed away when I was 16. And so even more so it fell to me. And so about that time, my brother, who was older brother, was in the Marine Corps, and he was transferred to D.C. to Henderson Hall, where they train the Marines to go on embassy duty. And my husband was based there also. He wasn't my husband at the time, but that's where I met my husband. And so eventually my father remarried, and And as I said, I met my husband and we got married, and our first duty station was in California. So he was a career Marine, and we spent the next almost 20 years in the Marine Corps. And military life is very hard on families. It really is. And Marine Corps is probably the hardest because there's kind of an unwritten rule in the Marine Corps that if we wanted you to have a wife and family, we would have issued you one. And they don't make much allowances for the needs that families had. And he was deployed on 5 unaccompanied tours during that time. And it seemed like to me, every time I got pregnant, he was deployed off somewhere for a year. So that wasn't easy. But that being said, it was also a very good life. We got to do a lot of things that a lot of people didn't. But still, we were always moving around a lot. And we had 5 children. And so in 1978, he finally reached retirement, and he retired. And we bought a little kind of hobby farm in Salem, Missouri. If you don't know where that is, it's about 30 miles south of Rolla. And we had our 5 children. We moved there. It was just a really nice small town, a really nice kind of healing time for a family that had to put up with a lot of difficulties sometimes, with the moving and things like that. And we raised strawberries. We had a pick-your-own strawberry farm. We kept honeybees. My husband always loved gardening and planting flowers, and he would go into the woods and go hunting, and he'd come at old abandoned farmstead and find clumps of flowers around, and he'd just stick them up and bring them home and plant them. We had rows and rows of all kinds of flowers. We didn't even know what the names of some of them were. And a friend came out one time and saw all of that, and she says, "What do? You sell these things?" And we said, "Would anybody buy them?" She says, "Oh, nurseries would be crazy." So that started our wholesale nursery business. And we actually, our very first big customer was Wickman Gardens here in Springfield. And we did that for a number of years, just traveling around, selling our flowers, growing them. And eventually the kids grew up and moved away. But it was just a wonderful time, a wonderful change of pace for us. And my husband had a heart attack. He passed away in 2010. And so I stayed on the farm for a while, but it got too much just for me to deal with and handle. So I sold the farm and moved to be near my daughter in Patterson, Missouri, which is a little north of Poplar Bluff. And her husband was the pastor of the Methodist Church there. And when he retired, he wanted to go into chaplaincy work. And he came here to Mercy to go through their training program. And he told me, he said, "Mom, we don't want to leave you on a gravel road in Wayne County, so we're bringing you with us." Or we want to bring you with us. So that's how I ended up in Springfield. They had been pastoring at Willard for a number of years, and they met Bob Cassidy during that time. And so that's how we ended up at Schweitzer Church, because when we came back here, he wanted to go to church here. And that's kind of where I am today.
Wow. What a fascinating story and journey from Houston to Springfield and all kinds of stops in between. You've given us all kinds of things to think about and to talk about. One of the things that I found a number of things in there that are really fascinating. But one of the things you said your mom died when you were 16.
Right.
And what was that experience like of being a teenager and with a lot of responsibilities and younger siblings. What was that like to lose your mom?
Well, like I said, her health had been failing for so many years, and well, I found I maybe didn't realize it at the time, but I had a lot of resentment because I couldn't do a lot of the things that other teenagers did because I had like 5 kids to take care of. I mean, it's something you had to do, so you just did it. And I didn't think all that much about it at the time, but later on, I realized I kind of missed a lot of my childhood because I was busy doing grown-up things. And I had to work through all of that, And
what were some of the things that you missed in that time that if you could, you'd like to go back and like experience again?
Well, I think maybe most of all, just not feeling like I had to carry all that all the time. I had to worry about if the kids got their lunch for school. I had to worry if they had their clothes clean. I had to worry if they had their lunch money. And it just seemed like I always had something I had to take care of. And it would have just been so nice to just be free. And I don't mean to make it sound like it was drudgery, because I think my parents realized, that they were putting a lot off on me. And they tried as much as they could to, give me, some kind of life of my own. And one of my things, my mother loved dancing. She made sure we all took dancing. And, just whatever she could to try to make it lighter. But I think the biggest thing was just always feeling kind of that weight I had to carry when I just wanted to have fun and like everybody else did.
So how is that sense, like a weight that you had to carry? How did that stay with you, or did you leave it behind, or how has that impacted you over the course of your life?
In a way, I think it kind of prepared me, because being married to a military man, it was kind of the same thing. And, I just moved into it because that's what I'd always done. And so I just did what I had to do. And I don't know, it wasn't all bad, I don't think. And I think in some ways God knows what our future looks like, and He knows how to get us ready for it.
Yeah. There, you've mentioned a couple different times about how the Lord is, He's gotten you ready for things, and He's walked with you. Could you take a couple of minutes and describe like what your faith walk has been like, or what have been some significant moments in your faith along the way?
Well, first of all, my family was a Catholic family, so I was raised as a Catholic. And they were practicing Catholics. It was very important to them. I was in Catholic school for the first part of my schooling years. And we were moved in an area where that wasn't possible, but they saw to it we kept with our catechism lessons, that we got to Mass, we got to confession, all the things that Catholics do. And so that was very much my upbringing in the faith, and it was a good discipline, learning the disciplines of faith early in life. And I was in the Catholic Church till I was in my 30s. And I went through what's known as the Charismatic Renewal in the Catholic Church, which just really enlarged my faith tremendously and brought me more into the concept of the relationship that we have with God, because that hadn't been so much. It was the things that we had to do to make God happy. But during the renewal, it brought out the need for that relationship and how God interacts in our lives. And I probably would have stayed in the Catholic Church if we had stayed in California, because the church was changing very much. And they were moving into all of that out there. But when we moved to that small rural town They weren't interested in Bible study. They weren't interested in changes. They liked everything the way it was. And I just had a deep hunger to know more about God's Word and learn how that shapes our lives, which is something I had never really had. And so I eventually joined a church where I could get that. And so that was a big change. And then as I just continued to study Scripture and grow and just come closer to an understanding of who I was to God and what He wanted to be to me. And it's kind of hard sometimes to put into words how the different ways He touches your lives and changes you. And particularly, He's given me a heart to reach out and help people, and that's where I became interested in learning more about healing and helping people come to, you think of physical healing, but the deeper healings that we need are the broken places in our life, you know. And I talked about how I always felt like I carried a weight, you know, and had all this on my shoulders all the time. And that got to me at a point where I was crumbling, you know, and it was, I had never, I'd always been taught I had to do these things for God. You know, this is what God wanted of me. And it just seemed like I could never do enough, you know. And I was watching a Billy Graham crusade on TV one night. And he said, God loves you. He sent His Son to die for you. He wants to come and live in your heart if you'll just surrender your life to Him. I never heard that before. I thought, that's what I need, is a God who will come to me. And I just did what He said. I just knelt down and just surrendered to Him that night. And that was really where my faith began to turn around and grow, I think. You know, just...
How old were you when that happened?
I was about 32, 33, I think.
How did that shape your family? Because I assume at that point you had kids and you were married, or at least you had some of your kids. And...
My husband was actually in Japan, and I was in Moses Lake, Washington with the 5 kids. It was quite a shock to him when he got home, because he was used to, you know, go to Mass and do the things that Catholics do, but he wasn't used to this woman that was crazy about the Bible. So let me just say it was kind of rough for a few years as God kind of got me settled down and kind of got him used to it. So, but, yeah.
So how did your life together develop from that point on? Because you said earlier that after he retired and you moved to Salem and there was a healing place for you all, a healing time. Mm-hmm. So how did that working out of faith, newfound vibrancy, happen in such a way that Salem was this healing time?
Well, it kind of all worked together. I mean, you can't kind of like do your life step 1, step 2, step 2, step 3. And like I said, when this happened, we were still in the military. And just him keeping up with his military and me taking care of kids, we just moved through life. But it was also, I think, for him, because he'd been 2 tours in Vietnam. He struggled, I think, some with PTSD from that. He never was. I think one reason he never got as bad as some is he was never a drinking person. And he could talk about things. You know, he didn't keep them bottled up inside. But he struggled with it. And I think getting out of the military, getting into a life that he loved to do, he was more ready to move into his own faith journey. And so sometimes I'm not quite sure how it worked out. But he began to go to church with the family, which he hadn't done much when he was in the military. and sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes he'd get upset with something a preacher said and decide he wasn't going back. So he had his own struggle with it, but we kind of both knew we needed to give each other the space we needed to do what we felt God was going to do in our lives.
Huh. That's a really good story that you have there and that developed between the two of you. You didn't mention his name.
Oh, well, we kind of had, everybody called him Gus because our last name was Gustin, and it was just kind of a a nickname he picked up. But kind of between us, I would call him Raymond because his name was actually Raymond, and he would call me Mary, but everybody else called him Gus.
Okay. You had 5 kids.
Yes.
What's that like being a mom to 5 kids?
Well, it shaped my life. Kids have a way of shaping your life, I think. And I do. I have a son and 4 daughters. And I'm just very blessed with my children. They're all very good. They're always very attentive to me. And they get along pretty well with each other, which doesn't always happen. And all of them live here in Missouri, except my youngest daughter, who lives in Virginia. And I live here with my daughter and son-in-law in Springfield. And the others live over around Salem in that area where we had our farm. And, so through the years, they had to go years without their dad being around. And my son was the oldest, and he got to a point where he felt like he had to be the man of the family and boss the girls around, and that didn't work too well with them. But he always stepped up and just knew he needed to be there for Mom and do what he could. And and they've each developed their own people, as they left home. And
do you have any particular memories that stick out to you that you just treasure from being a mom or raising your kids that's like, that's a really special one that you've got tucked away in your heart somewhere?
Oh, gosh. Well, they're all special, aren't they? You've got 4 kids. You know that.
Yeah.
And I recently had to write a story. I think I shared that with you. Mm-hmm. And I made a point of writing each of their birth stories in there. And that just brought back so many sweet memories of that time when you first hold that baby in your arms and you look at it and you think about all the things that you want for that child. And all of those were precious to me, And just the different ways their personalities take off, and sometimes the hard times you have with them as you're watching them grow. I think all of the memories I have with treasuring my family, my children, and just being able to do things together. And I kind of like it that in our time there wasn't so much technology, especially in Salem, Missouri. There was no cell phones and no internet, really, even. And so, we did things together. We played games together. They worked on the farm with us. They used to bring their friends, used to help out when it was time to bring crops in or do work. And so we got to have a lot of interaction and time together, and I think that kind of builds closeness in families.
What's your favorite crop to either plant or to harvest?
Well, I can tell you strawberries are a lot of work,
Yes,
but I like to eat them really well. I really, you don't probably think of it so much as the crop, but we really enjoyed working with the honeybees and harvesting the honey, and just it's a fascinating thing to do. And the flowers, of course, we love the flowers. And our main crop, the one that people most wanted was creeping phlox, which is an early spring flower, and no growers in this area. So we had a huge, outreach in that, in growing creeping phlox. So if you have creeping phlox in your yard in Springfield, it probably came from our farm.
Wow. That's some incredible insight in terms of where creeping phlox came from in Springfield. That's beautiful. One question we might ask, and this is kind of a reflection kind of question, like, you look over the course of your life, who are some people that have made significant impressions upon you, and what was the purpose or the reason why they made such an impression?
I think probably very much my grandmothers, both grandmothers on my father's side and my mother's side. Always said I had a Catholic grandmother and a Baptist grandmother. But just the way they lived their life, they were widows during my lifetime, yet they supported themselves. They set an example. I got to spend time with them. My mother's mother, she was a great seamstress, and she taught me to sew. She taught me to crochet, and those are things I still love to do today. And also my father's mother, I didn't get to spend as much time with her because she didn't live as close to us. But I don't know, she just had a gentle, simple way about her, and I just liked to spend time with her and listen to her stories. And she was very much into church and talking about the Lord, and so I enjoyed those times with her. And other times, because I lost my mother, and I felt like this was something the Lord always did for me, it seemed like at critical times in my life, He'd put an older woman there to just kind of help me along. Mm-hmm. And I remember when we were once stationed in Georgia, and my husband's first sergeant lived next door to us. And his wife was just, to me, an example of what a mother should be. And I just looked up to her and admired her so much. And my family were just young and babies. They had like 6 kids. And just to watch her interact with them, I thought that's what I want to be to my family. Mm-hmm. And just a couple of times like that, God would put somebody in my life that just kind of carried me along and mentored me and encouraged me. Mm-hmm.
Well, looking forward, what are some things that you might like to do that you feel like are still left undone, or that you'd like to embark upon? Maybe there's some things on a bucket list or something like that.
Well, yeah, I guess I probably have a bucket list. One of the things I think I'd like to do again, because a couple of years ago I got to go to Israel, and it was just a tour, and it's just so enriching to be in the Holy Land and get to go there. And I'm involved with a ministry there called Bridges for Peace, and I'd just like to go back there and spend some more time and just get to... When I went on a study tour with this ministry, and it was wonderful because it wasn't going to just your traditional sites. You were actually interacting with the people of Israel, and you just really got a feel and heart for what's all going on there. It's like the Bible's living, you know. Mm. And so that is one thing I'd like to do again. And at my age, I have done so many things. My life has been so rich and full. I don't know what else I aspire to, except I just think just to live out well what life I have left and be able to do what will most be a benefit to others and blessing to my family. And I don't really have any more ambitions now that I'm older like I did when I was younger.
Is there anything that when you wake up in the morning, you're like, like you're chomping at the bit to do?
Well, it depends on what day it is and how I'm feeling sometimes. Well, I do like to get up. I always like to have my quiet time in the morning and read the Bible, and it kind of depends on what's going on in my day. Like Tuesday's my day to be at church and helping out with things, and I like to do that. And I like to go out and meet with friends and just, whatever's going on in my day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm really thankful for this opportunity to hear your story and all of those journeys from Houston to traveling around to Salem to Springfield. It's a marvelous, beautiful life filled with a lot of love, and it's fantastic to hear you talk about your story and the people that have had a real impact on it. I'd like to close with a final question. Do you have a final word or a piece of sage advice that you'd like to leave with us?
Well, I wished I would have slowed down more and taken more time just to appreciate what was around me. Not always feeling like I had to push ahead, to accomplish more, to do more, to be more. And I feel that more now that I'm older, and I just think, I wished I had paid a little more attention to the details in life of just relaxing and also even the hard things that you go through. Somehow, if you can bring those to the Lord and get His perspective on him. I love a scripture, I think it's in Psalm 84, he says that when we go through the Valley of Baca, that we make it a place of springs. And we go from strength to strength and glory to glory. I think if we can bring those hard places in our life to the Lord and let Him turn them into springs and let Him bring us through those and make us stronger and bring us, into the glory that He is over our lives. I don't know if that's advice, but that's kind of what guides me.
Thank you for sharing that. And Marianne, thanks for coming in and sitting down and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for giving me opportunity. This was easier than I thought it would be.
That was amazing. A big thank you to Marianne for sharing her story. In listening to Marianne, I hope that you felt inspired, encouraged, and challenged, and that you begin to find a place to behold and listen to the really cool people around you. This Really Cool People podcast is produced by Schweitzer Church, Springfield, Missouri. Taylor Like serves as executive producer and editor, and I'm your host, Jason Leininger. Until next time, you can help us by liking, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. See you later.